Welcome Home Radio Podcast. Are you looking to buy or sell your home? Our team is here with answers to guide you through the buying and selling process. We encourage you to ask questions. Please comment on this show or visit us at welcomehomeradio.net for more information. Bringing real estate, lending, and education together in one place, and to help you make the right home decision for you and your family.
And welcome to Welcome Home Radio. It is August 14th. We are so excited about today's topic, and I want to welcome Randy Smith, Senior Staff Instructor at Champion School of Real Estate. He helps keep Thom in line. Randy, welcome so much. We're going to be talking today about the NAR Agreement. So many people out there have this topic on their edge. They're concerned about their commissions. They're concerned about the direction of the industry. We're going to try to calm the waves, calm the fires, answer some questions that we have, plus probably some stimulating conversation that we don't know all the questions to ask. So I want to get started right in. Randy, welcome, and tell us a little bit about your history real quick over at Champions before we get started.
Sure. Great. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I've been looking forward to this. I've been with Champions for 21 years. And I've been in the industry going on 35 years. And about 9 years ago, made a decision to kind of pull out from selling and now I do three things: teach, and teach. And I love it. I'm with the best school in the country. So look forward to a little discussion on this topic, which probably has more questions than answers.
Well, thank you for your experience. Now, I am going to throw you in the bucket with Thom. Those that can't do, teach. So, you know,
it certainly applies to Thom.
Well, guys, the NAR agreement that came down from a lawsuit, there seems to be a panic out there. There seems to be not understanding. There seems to be concern and fear. And what I take away from this agreement is basically realtors are going to be, everything's been negotiable up here. It didn't really change anything legally. It just made more clarification, like in the lending area of disclosures. We want to know what you're doing for the money you're earning, and they have to qualify their job and they have to communicate it. So would you agree with that summary, or would you add something to it?
Well, if you're asking me, I would say, yeah, I would agree with that. Commissions are negotiable. They always have been. Whether that was applied out in the market, that's another thing. But certainly, in my opinion, and I have to be real careful because we've had a directive come down just to be real careful about how we talk about these upcoming changes, and many of which are already underway. That's from our senior management and whatnot. So I just look at this from a realtor perspective, and I think what it's done is really open up the door to a couple of different narratives. Buyers are probably going to see a kind of a utopia environment where they're going to be able to compete. Agents are going to compete very fiercely for buyer clients out there. And then at the same time, buyers have to realize that they could be on the hook for thousands of dollars, $7,000 to $10,000 on, say, a $400,000 sale. And therefore decide not to use an agent. So, the decision not to use an agent is, really the fault of our industry, because if we articulate our value proposition appropriately and let people know what we bring to the table and help them to get through what they don't know that they don't know, then we should come out very well on the other end. But unfortunately, we've got an industry where incompetency is kind of abounds, and that's what got us in this predicament, is the bottom line. So anyway,
all right, great job. That's he just summed it all up. Thanks, Randy. Great show.
Okay, we're finished. Thanks.
Well said.
No problem. That answered everything.
Well, then that brings about the question: if you're going to say you're going to see buyers representing themselves, which this is a real estate contract they're going to go into, we going to see more FSBOs as well?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, definitely. And of course, that's FSBOs have always been about 5 to 7% of the market out there. And of course, during a hot sellers market, which we have come out of into more of a balanced market, you usually see a rise in FSBOs. So they take on the attitude, all I need to do is put a sign in the yard and I'll get a bunch of offers. And you know what, that can happen, but they still may not be getting the best representation. So yeah, I do think it's going to result in more FSBOs. I think it's going to result in at least initially a decline in our in realtor numbers as some decide to pull out of the business, which they do anyway when the market shifts from buyers to sellers, whatever. And I think that when it's all said and done and the wash is finished, then I believe we'll come out better. The industry will come out better on the other end. And that tends to be the changes I've seen in my career in real estate. We've seen some significant ones. We always tend to come out better on the other end as an industry. So we'll hope this plays out the same way.
It's interesting. You prefaced your first comment with, I have to watch what I say because Champions has already said, something could happen. Litigious society that we're in, lawsuits can be thrown. Well, what I see with what you're saying, I see even more lawsuits taking place since a real estate contract is not being negotiated by professionals like realtors that have been trained by people like yourself, that for sale by owners being taken advantage of by a listing agent that knows what they're doing, or a buyer's agent working with the FSBO that doesn't know what they're doing. I mean, do you see where this might lead to more litigious or more lawsuits at
Absolutely.
first before we calm down and get back to realizing we were doing this always anyway? It's, I really am trying hard to understand all the fear. Why is it there? And then what is going, like you're saying, what comes out at the end? We had an industry where we had realtors that were part-time, and part-time professionals cannot be professionals, in my opinion, because they're not fully trained. They're not gone through the experiences. They don't know how to communicate everything that's required. They have no understanding of differences of lending styles or cash buyers and what are the benefits, what are the concerns. I mean, to me, I think this is going to choke the industry a little bit before we finally start breathing again. Would that agree with that statement?
Yeah, and there's a lot there, and just I've to one point you made, I know a lot of good, very good professional agents that may be part-time. I also know a lot of agents that kind of hold themselves out as, I've been in the business 20 or 30 or 40 years, and in some cases they've been in the business 1 year times 30. They haven't grown, they haven't changed, they're still doing things the ways that we've that have altered the and brought in new models and things like that. So anyway, that aside, gosh, there was so much there, Blair, that I just think there's what's happened is and where we're going. We could have avoided simply by doing what has always been recommended. The NAR has always had that ongoing theme of, commissions are negotiable. And yeah, we know that by federal law, the Sherman Act. But so if we had just been doing what we should be doing all along, getting buyer rep agreements signed, only 13 states a couple of months ago required a buyer's rep agreement to be signed in order to be paid. It's now up to probably 20 states, and eventually it will be all 50 states. And again, the listing culture is well entrenched in our with consumers. They know if they're going to put their home on the market, they're going to need to list it with a realtor. But what isn't entrenched in our industry is buyer representation, which since Senate Bill 489 was passed back in 1995. That's what brought buyer agency to Texas. And it seems like we've done more things to stiff arm it than to move along with it, being able to articulate our value, let a buyer know what we bring to the table. And I believe that with certain buyers, not all, there's always going to be people out there that can do it better on their own, so they think. But the informed agent who understands their agency law and can articulate their value and really communicate to that buyer what we bring to the table, in the way of, starting with a counseling session. And the first thing I do or would do in a counseling session is demand a pre-approval letter and or a commitment to getting pre-approved. So the informed agent, the educated agent, the professional agent knows these things. Unfortunately, there's not enough of us out there to overcome what has eventuated with agents not being committed to getting a rep agreement signed and not being able to articulate their value. That's why the NAR and through Champions and other education providers has opened the door for a free designation course called Accredited Buyer Representation. Accredited Buyer Representative. But anyway, I'm one of the 4 instructors that's been teaching those free courses. And I think it's going to take things like that to change, to take this new model and to see over a period of time to see it more widely accepted. Again, we'll see.
So one thing you hit on, Randy, which you're totally right. Blair, when you opened the show, you talked about the fact of so many are panicking. Well, only those that have not prepared properly. Brokers or educators, such as the 2 gentlemen we have with us, if they've been learning, if they've been growing, we knew this since the end of last summer, this was happening. And you have some that literally last week at a broker say, hey, can you come in and teach my team? It's like, it's been said for a while, if you wait till August, you're going to get left behind. This was just a matter of preparing and getting ready and understanding what the new rules were. So, and that being said, it's just that's where the panic comes from. And everything Randy said was right. Those who have worked hard and practiced and prepared and learned, they're going to be ready to go. Yes, there's going to be a few bumps in the road, but they're going to be absolutely much more ready because they also have a broker who's available to help them through it as well. So,
very true. I want to go back to something that I think is basic. And we call it laissez-faire in other industries. Let the buyer beware. Ignorance of the law is not a reason, but somehow this lawsuit took place even though the buyers or sellers were ignorant of, hey, commissions are negotiable. But it's been negotiable the whole time. How did this come through? And why did this lawsuit take place to help, I don't know, reestablish existing law that was already there in the industry to bring it to the forefront? Why was this allowed to move forward as opposed to other industries where laissez-faire, let the buyer beware?
I think they showed through the court, they showed videos of the top brokerages across the country at the big rallies. And all they said was 6%, 6%, 6%. On the forums, a lot of times in brokerage's office, it was automatically typed in 6%, 6%. So when this is my understanding, and Randy and Thom, please, y'all add in, but that's how they said the industry was not being out and open, like Randy said at the beginning, not communicating properly and being a professional. And that's now, please add to that.
Yeah, just to interject there, if you were to, Google or Bing or DuckDuck, whatever, what's the number one complaint against a realtor? Very often at the top of the list is transparency. And I think that first and foremost, that's what's going to have to evolve out of this and will evolve out of it.
So they're going to lose more weight.
What's that?
So they're going to lose more weight.
Yeah. It's
it sometimes takes a while for some of these.
It does. I mean,
don't worry.
It's all about timing. I know. I was bad. I'm sorry.
But
dad joke.
Well, consumers, this is why we, realtors have never had they've always been right up there at the top of the list with most disrespected professionals, along with lawyers and car salespeople. And, it's always been a neck and neck race. And I believe all three always have the ability to overcome that if they just would. We basically detest change. We get very comfortable in what's going on and how it works. And the minute somebody, however it comes to be, steps in and says, you know what, we're going to do it this way because this way is probably better or is better. And right there, the fences go up and without even understanding what positive can come out of this for the consumer. And that's what it's always all about. Then there's a lot of closed ears and eyes to what's happening. People don't want to understand it, therefore they don't. And more often than not, and if you don't understand it, as Einstein said, if you can't explain it, you don't understand it. So that's what we need to do first, is make sure that everyone understands what's going on in our industry, and then being able to communicate that to buyers and sellers,
as well as education, whether they're the brokers group, an education on how they're going to communicate it from their own descriptions, their own design, their own contracts. I've gotten to sit into a lot of realtor meetings about this, and it just seems like they're making things difficult. So which side is going to be harder from y'all's perspective, the listing or the buying side on this?
The buying side, I think, if you're repping a buyer, because for decades, a selling agent who's representing a buyer is saying, hey, I'm going to help you go find your dream home. And guess what? I'm free. The seller pays my commissions. That was my sales pitch. And then you get in the car with me, Blair, and we go look at houses. That was my pitch. You don't have to pay for me. I'm going to pick the houses out that fit your description, and here we go. Is that fair, Randy? Tom?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And of course, for the fallout for the seller, may be that the buyer can still have their agent, if the buyer is their client, to write into a contract that the whole thing's contingent upon you, the seller, paying my broker, 3% or 2.5% or whatever. But Blair made a point earlier that this is probably going to open up the door for some additional lawsuits. And just ironically, over the weekend, I taught an SAE class over the weekend, and I got an email from one of my Facebook friends and fellow industry people, and he was describing what he had just encountered, where he had a buyer, a couple. The wife is an attorney. And the guy refused to, the agent told the buyer, you're going to have to sign a buyer rep agreement. You can sign it for one day for one property. Well, that's when the husband stepped up and said, my wife's an attorney and we're just not going to sign any agreement, yada, yada, yada. And here we go. And in fact, that guy went on to kind of imply that the agent was practicing law without a law license, which was not the case. And that kind of insinuated that, if we were to go further on this, we might end up, or stopping it right now, it could result in us suing you. For what? I don't know. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff that we're going to hear out there. I don't think I told this friend of mine that I said, maybe you didn't articulate your value well enough or really explain the process, or you're right. You're just going to see a lot of fences go up to try to keep the old model in play, because that's what, buyers and sellers, the informed ones, understand today. Those that don't, we may not be able to help them. But yeah, anyway, it's again, it's kind of, I kind of ramble on this because there's just so much here. But it comes back to the simplicities, the fundamentals of it. If, as Jeff mentioned, if we had done what we're supposed to do all along, if brokers trained their agents on how and why agency law operates the way it does in terms of representation, then we probably wouldn't have found ourselves in this pickle. But other things that we can throw out there, what's going to happen to sub-agency? That's our agency default mechanism in Texas. So if you're a working with, as a buyer's agent with a customer, then by default, you're representing the seller. Well, if that's the case, then what is the seller going to pay that? Or will they allow sub-agency? I don't think sub-agency is a good play anyway. But these are kind of the things that are going to show up. But again, if we'd been doing it the way we should, and we at Champions, believe that our instructors, particularly in our designation courses, can really help them learn how to articulate that value, how to explain the process. And again, really, I think it falls squarely in our lap. It's our fault that we got ourselves in this predicament, starting with what Jeff said by telling buyers, I work for you for free. Well, maybe some agents do, but at the end of the day, no, we don't. Somebody is compensating us and always has. So anyway, it's no wonder the consumer's confused.
Well, and you brought up a situation where, right now the internet has been exploding and it's done an unbelievable thing. When I got out of the military, finally got an email. I mean, this was unbelievable. And a pager was great technology to me, as opposed to now we have all this clickbait out here and we think we're smart because we read it on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
What do you see? I mean, here's an example of what I see happening and what I think might happen. So far, the key question is the buyer reps wants to know whether the listing person, the seller, is going to pay his compensation or not. That's a fact they want to find out now. It's become critical, but they can't communicate it per the lawsuit on the internet in any which way, on NMLS anyway. Do you see things happening because, one, listing agents now got to take a lot more phone calls because buyer agents are going to want to know, or they're going to do workarounds like 3 times is better than none at this home, and that 3 times is really telling them, look, buyers agents get 3. They're going to be coded in the message on the MLS. I mean, what do you see happening here? Because I just see a lot of confusion with large brokerages, small brokerages, ignorance in a lot of cases. It just seems to be a concern of what do you see happening. And I think the job of the listing agent is going to be harder than the buyers, Jeff, to be perfectly honest. I think, as a home buyer, I want some help. I want to know, here's my geographical, here's my pre-approval. I want to work with you. Go get it.
But am I prepared to pay for it? And that's where we begin to trip up. And I, in my career, I've had probably 4 or 5 clients that I worked with over the years that insisted on paying my commission. There are those people out there that as long as that commission is tied to the seller, they're not going to feel like they're fully represented. But those people are few and far between. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to see a lot of fierce competition for buyers, or we're going to simply add another layer to the confusion that's out there. And again, that falls squarely on us. We have to take the initiative. We have to remember that the purpose of our License Act, the purpose of the commission, is to protect the consumer. And ultimately, there's going to be a lot of questions, when a realtor says, well, I'm not going to go show that house because they don't pay any commission, or the buyer would have to pay my commission. But over here, I've heard that the seller will pay the commission. That is not in the best interest of their client. And ultimately, that's the L in old car, loyalty, which is the most important of the 6 duties, always putting the interest of your client before your own. Clearly, if I'm going to go show that property and push that property because I'm going to be paid by the seller, and this one I'm not going to show, that's clearly not in the interest of our client.
Well, and let's keep in mind part of why this also, we've touched on a few points, but another reason why this lawsuit happened is because they proved that so many agents who were not ethical, if a seller was not going to pay 6%, someone representing a buyer would not take their client to see that home because that agent realized they might only get 4%. That was a huge part of this lawsuit because they proved that people were not showing and doing their due diligence no matter what the commissions were.
Yeah. I agree completely. So.
And the other, going back to you talked about with FSBOs or buyers representing themselves, there are simple enough contracts that can happen. But I think it's important that what starts happening, I've closed many FSBOs over the years, and most of them are pretty smooth. But understand, people, if you negotiate a contract and bring it to a title company or to a lender, I don't represent buyer or seller. Right. Any title company represents the contract. So when you think I'm going to do this myself, and then you're going to lean on that title company to answer all these questions about it, legally, we cannot. You have to have an attorney do that for you. So then you're going to pay an attorney, but you didn't want to pay a real estate agent. There's a big difference and what your focus is and your needs are there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just yesterday I was reviewing the short form of the new buyer rep agreement. There's a short form and a long form, and I haven't had time to really review them in depth. But what I can see from the short form is that from the realtor's perspective, we have no indemnification there. And that's going to be a problem. So that's going to have to change when, in fact, the form is hardly even being used out there. So, we're owed in a client relationship. The client owes us CRIP, compensation, reimbursement, indemnification, and performance. So while those other elements are in the short form and, of course, the long form, indemnification is not in the short form. So again, right out of the gate, we've got a form that was probably quickly put together, and that's fine, but it's going to command some changes right out of the gate.
Okay, we're going to hit, I think, a big topic here, shifting to the listing side. EXP has stated only 3% listing agreement, period. What do you think of this standard across EXP? What do you think that they're listing, they're only going to do? Do you think that's going to keep, as Jeff brought up, well, buyers know they can't try to get anything from that. That means they have to have a solid agreement with their buying clients. But what do you think a brokerage putting a standard like that out there, going all listing agreements at 3%? What's going to happen?
I think Jeff's trying to lean into saying the same thing I am, is that if you haven't had that discussion with the seller that commissions are negotiable by federal law, that's going to parlay out there in the industry, regardless of what company it is that there is this standard commission fee, and when in fact that's not the case. So it could again open up some more lawsuits. And again, whatever happens on the listing side is going to find its way over onto the buyer side and probably add to the fuel to the fire. So I was looking for a note I had made that let me see. Probably the biggest thing for realtors and our brokers out there is we have a big question for the loan originator. Particularly for first-time buyers. Will we be able to, and I understand now you can roll that commission into the mortgage, but the FHFA, I think, is going to have something to say about that somewhere down the road. So that's our question. How do we deal with the buyer? And as you get them to understand, yes or no, we may or may not be able to do this in terms of rolling the commission into the mortgage.
Okay. Breaking news. You heard it first. Welcome Home Radio. We're putting commissions into loans because I don't know of a single guideline that has been changed on anything for FHA, VA, conventional, USDA that allows commissions to be in the loan itself. Thom?
Well, I think what Randy is interpreting here is the notation that comes out is that previously, for instance, VA did not allow the buyer to pay the commission in the transaction. That's what they're actually meaning by that notation, that they've made those adjustments.
Okay, that's the only adjustment I'm aware of.
Now, if a seller agrees to seller concessions of 2% or 3% or 4%, seller concessions are based off the sales price. So if a seller includes that in section 12 of the TREC promulgated contract, 1 to 4 family or the condo contract, if they include that 3%, 2%, 2.5%, 4% number, the seller in that situation, then that monies that are there can then apply towards the cost of the commission if agreed upon by both parties.
Okay.
And that's where I was. This note, I was, I've read some from so many different sources, but it was actually a pretty well-known lender out there that I kind of quote them saying, for now, buyers can roll commission into the mortgage under new rules, but it's widely accepted that the FHFA, as we know, who oversees Fannie and Freddie, whatnot, may want to change those rules. So again, I'm not a loan originator, so I can't really speak to what has been and what will be, but only what I may hear that has been happening out there. And by the way, that VA issue was resolved June 12th is when the VA came down and said, for now, we're going to allow VA borrowers to pay commission to a buyer. To have the buyer pay the commission. So whereas before that was we had to rely on the seller.
But that was very misleading, Thom. Would you agree in the way they stated that? Because rolling it in means I can incur that additionally over and above the cost or the appraisal value of the home.
Yeah, rolling in our verbiage in the real estate business have always been the scariest thing to hear, because older real estate agents often say, well, just roll that into the loan. And it's like, I don't know what you mean. I got to do this. How am I doing this?
Yeah.
You're upside down right out of the gate. The buyer is.
Oh, yeah.
Well, final
and
question.
that touches upon, this is something I had a conversation with a really well-known appraiser here at the Dallas Mortgage Bankers meeting here about 2 weeks ago. And I asked, well, how is this going to affect appraisals? And we may want to put that in our next session, or I can talk about it now, but summary kind of situation. Summary situation from Mark said to the effect that, rolling these costs in or not having them in the cost, will they affect value? And he said, yeah, it's going to affect value, but keep in mind, value is a reflection of price. So if price is going to be inclusive of that amount, then the price would be a reflection of what the market is bearing at that juncture. So values may come in a little bit lower at first, but once the market catches up to how it's being included in the valuation, that could eventually affect pricing in the marketplace to drive prices up or down depending on how it's approached, which is another thought process, because I hear, realtors out there worrying, well, this is going to affect, it's going to lower values. Well, no, if it lowers pricing, then it will affect the value. But if it is keeping the pricing where it is because it's still included, then it's not going to affect value like they think it will.
Would you think it's a fair analogy that what we're talking about here would be likened to rolling personal property into the loan, which I know is not.
It's that seller concession thing. Exactly. It fits in that category that if we're going to roll furniture into a deal, the appraiser has to take into consideration what is the value of that furniture that was rolled into the deal. And that's non-realty items, so they end up taking it out of the transaction. So yeah, it's going to be looked at, I think, in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
Thom, I was curious. I have a question, or Randy. We're seeing as the inventory is increasing, there are houses listed that are sitting there 30, 45 days, and they're up to 60 and not changing their price at all. Is that also because of what we've already seen in the last 5-10 years or less, 5 years, where people were paying 25, 50 grand over asking price when they were battling for that contract acceptance? Because they want to get every penny of that back, or is that not quite the case?
Yeah, Nat, I'm sorry, but I'm really what's the question there?
Well, the question is, when you talked about rolling in commissions or rolling in all these fees, I think we're already seeing some current sellers who are on the market who paid way over the asking price, who are expecting to get that same dollar back, and it's not coming into them with that offer just because I said, I want that house so much for my family, I'm willing to pay $50,000 more for it.
Yeah, and that's something that a buyer at that time, but doesn't want to hear, doesn't want to contemplate. They just want to go down that path of thinking appreciation will continue, so I won't have to worry about that until they do. And right. And so we'll see what happens if we enter into a buyer's market, and we for the realtor. I warn them all the time, if you helped a buyer purchase a home 3 years ago or even further back, and they paid 10, 12, 15, whatever % over list price, when you get that phone call later, meaning now, hey, we paid this for it, but now you're telling us we can only sell it for this. Again, that's going to create some of that spite in the industry, and of course, blame the realtor for something we have no control over, which is the market. So, if that makes sense.
And that good point, again, it comes back to the appraisal side of the deal. If, the market is what's dictating how much you get for a house, and the value of the realtor should be going up, but the values of the property are going down because of supply and demand. I go to an example. My daughter just bought a house in Austin, and the values there, she got it 5% below market listing price, and they included all the furniture in the house. Not all, but a good stroke of furniture in that house when they sold it. So we're seeing that softening in the marketplace. That always takes a while for sellers to get used to. That's something that's a big deal, because they think that something that happened 3 years ago, well, it's still happening now.
Yeah.
That's just, again, the educational process with regards to these values that we're seeing used out there by sellers. Well, I paid too much for it, and it's hard for them to confess to I paid too much for a house.
And again, Tom, that comes back to I think our agency law, where we have an obligation. It would fall under reasonable care that when we're working with a buyer or a seller, the first thing we do is define reality. What is the market doing? And is it in your favor or is it not? And so in a situation like that, we find ourselves in a position where we didn't provide an exit strategy. So reasonable care we would say to that buyer, you realize what the market's doing. You realize that this is a seller's market. You realize that you're going to be paying over list price, and you may never see that come back to you. And they may or may not want to hear that, or they hear it, but they don't. They hear it, but they don't listen to it. And that's what it's going to create, more and more of these scenarios that may come back to bite us, where. So I think I made that clear. And the first time buyers, I think, are the ones that are going to probably be harmed the most. And they're the ones we need most in our industry, because, that's what keeps the cycle going, if you will, and trading up and whatnot. So, but that's who I think is going to get hit the hardest.
I think your initial statement, where this raises more questions than we're going to be able to answer, is coming true. So I want to thank you for the time today. We're going to kick it off because we're going to come back next time and talk a little bit more about appraisals, flat fees, and then, of course, the outcome that you just shared, who's going to be affected, who's not, and how can we best prepare for this for our industry. So thank you again for your time today, Randy, Thom, Jeff. Appreciate y'all. God bless, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Blair. Thanks, Thom. Thanks, Jeff. Enjoyed it.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Welcome Home Radio production provided by Lunatic Digital. Check the listing of this podcast for the links to our sponsors. And don't forget to like, share, and follow us on social media. Visit welcomehomeradio.net for more information.
This was a Lunatic Digital production. Visit lunaticdigital.com for all your digital needs.